I'm Rory, and I'm pleased to introduce Elisabeth Robin's Votes for Women, a tale of the struggle of women's suffrage, told by 9 amazing women. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Votes for Women.
Evelyn come down yet? I won't have her disturbed if she's resting. She certainly needs it. But I want to know, the moment she comes down, that the new plans have arrived by the Morning Post. Is that Miss Levering?
Well, I'm afraid I'm scandalously early. Didn't take me nearly as long as to motor over as Lord John had said.
I'm afraid my husband is no authority on motoring, and he's not home yet from church.
What's the greatest luck finding you? I thought Miss Levering was the only person under this roof who was ever allowed to observe Sunday as a real day of rest.
If you've come to see Miss Levering.
Is she here? I give you my word I didn't know.
Oh.
Does she come every weekend?
Whenever we can get her to, but we've only known her a couple of months.
And I've only known her 3 weeks. Lady John, I've come to ask you to help me.
With Miss Levering, I can't do it.
Oh no, all that's no good. She only laughs.
She looks upon you as a boy.
Such rot. What do you think she said to me in the city the other day?
That she was 4 years older than you?
I knew that. No. She said she was all the charming things I'd been saying. But there's only one way to prove it, and that was to marry someone young enough to be her son. She noticed that's what the most attractive women did, and she named names.
You were too old.
Her future husband, she said, was just entering Eden.
Just like her?
I wanted to see you about secretyship.
You didn't get it then?
No, and it's the grief of my life.
Oh, if you don't get one, you'll get another.
But there is only one.
Only one vacancy?
Only one man I'd my ears to work for.
I remember.
Though I always talk about Stornor. Well, it's a habit people have gotten into.
I forget, do you know Mr. Stornor personally, or you just dazzle from afar?
Oh, I know him. Trouble is he doesn't know me. If he did, he'd realize he can't be sure of winning his election without my valuable services.
Geoffrey Stornor's re-election is always a foregone conclusion.
That the great man shares that opinion is precisely his weak point. His only weak point.
You think because the Liberals swept the country the last time.
How can we be sure any Conservative seat is safe after... Forgive me. I know you're not interested in politics qua politics, but this concerns Geoffrey Stornor.
And you kind of might be interested in him like all the rest of my sex.
Lady John, I've heard the news.
What news?
That your little niece, the Scotch heiress, is going to become Miss Geoffrey Stornor.
Who told you that?
Please don't mind my knowing.
She had her heart set upon having a few days with just her family in the secret before the flood of congratulations breaks loose.
Oh, that's all right. I always hear things before other people.
Well, I must ask you to be good enough to be very circumspect. I wouldn't have my niece thinking that I...
Of course not.
She will be here in an hour.
What? Today? The future Miss Stornor.
Yes, unfortunately, we had 1 or 2 people already ask for the weekend.
And I go invite myself to luncheon. Lady John, you can buy me off. I'll promise to remove myself in 5 minutes if you'll...
No, the penalty is that you shall stay and keep the others amused between church and luncheon, and so leave me free. Only remember...
Wild horses won't get a hint out of me. I only mentioned it to you because, well, since we've come to live in this part of the world, you've been so awfully kind. I hoped maybe you'd put in a word for me.
With?
With your nephew that is to be. Though I'm not the slavish satellite people make out, you can't doubt.
Oh, I don't doubt. But you know, Mr. Stornor inspires a similar enthusiasm in a good many young.
They haven't studied the situation as I have. They don't know what's at stake. They don't go to the whole Dutfield as I did just to hear Friday's speech.
Ah, but you're rewarded. Jean, my niece, wrote me that it was glorious.
Well, you know, I was disappointed. He's too content just to criticize, just to make his delicate, pungent fun of the men who are grappling. Very inadequately, of course, but still grappling with the big questions. There's a carrying power. Some of Stornor's friends ought to point it out, because there's a driving power in the poorest constructive policy that makes the most brilliant criticism look barren.
Who told you that?
You think there's nothing in it because I say? But now that he's coming into the family, Lord John or somebody really ought to point out Stornor's overdoing his role of magnificent security.
I don't see even Lord John offering to construct Mr. Stornor.
Believe me, that's just Stornor's danger. Nobody's saying a word. Everybody's hoping he's on the point of adopting some defiant line, something strong and original that's going to fire the public imagination and bring the Tories back to power.
So he will?
Not if he disappoints meetings, goes calmly up to the town and leaves the field to the Liberals.
When did he do anything like that?
Yesterday. And now that he's got this other preoccupation.
You mean...
Yeah, your niece, that spoilt child of fortune. Of course. She kept him from the meeting last night. Well, if that's the effect she's going to have on him, it's pretty serious.
You are.
I can assure you, the election agent's more so. He's simply tearing his hair.
How do you know?
He told me yesterday. I scraped acquaintance with the agent just to see if...
It's not only here that you maneuver for that secretaryship.
You can never tell when your chance might come. That election chap's promised to keep me posted.
And Susan, here I am.
My child. I thought that was you running up the avenue. Now they'll tell each other for 10 minutes that she's an hour earlier than we expected.
Freddie Tunbridge said they were coming to you this week.
Yes, they're dawdling through the park with the church brigade.
Oh. Well, I'll go meet them.
That discreet young man will get on. But how did you get here?
He motored me down.
Geoffrey Stornor? Where is he then?
He dropped me at the end of the avenue to go see a supporter about something.
You let him go off like that without... Just tell me, my child, is it all right?
My engagement? Yes, absolutely.
You don't think Geoffrey Stornor is going to be a little old for you?
That's me. Am I such a spring chicken?
24 used to not be so young, but it's become so.
Yes, we don't grow up so quick, but on the other hand, we stay up longer.
You've got what's vulgarly called looks, my dear, and that will help to keep you up.
I know what you're thinking, but I'm not the only girl who's been left with vulgarly called money.
You're the only one of our immediate circle who's been left so beautifully much.
But you see, Geoffrey, everyone knows Geoffrey could have married anyone in America.
I'm afraid everybody does know, not excepting Mr. Stornor. Well, how spoiled is the great man?
Not the least bit in the world. You'll see. Why, he so wants to know my best beloved relations better. An orphan has so few belongings. She has to make the most of them.
Let us hope he'll approve us of one more intimate acquaintance.
He will. He's an angel. Why, he gets on with my grandfather.
Does he? You mean to say Mr. Geoffrey Stornor isn't just a tiny bit superior about dissenters?
Not as much as you. My grandfather's been ill again, you know, and rather difficult. Bless him. But Geoffrey.
You must have powers of persuasion to get that old governor to let you come in a Ford motor car on Sunday, too.
Grandfather didn't know.
Didn't know?
I honestly meant to come by train, but Geoffrey met me on my way to the station. We had a glorious run. Oh, Aunt Susan, I've so longed to have you to myself the whole day just so we could talk about
Well, till luncheon, my dear. You mustn't mind if I... Miss Levering wasn't only tired last night, she was ill. I thought she looked very white.
Who is Miss... You don't mean to say there are other people?
One or two. Your uncle's responsible for asking that old cynic St. John Greatorex and I.
Mr. Greatorex? He's a radical, isn't he?
Jean, getting to thinking parties.
I only meant it was odd that he should be here naturally at my grandfather's.
Oh, it's all right, my child. Of course we expect now that you will think like Geoffroy Stornor and feel like Geoffroy Stornor and to talk like Geoffroy Stornor, and quite proper too.
Well, if I do think with my husband and feel with him too, as of course I shall, I'll be surprised at myself if I find myself talking a tenth as well. You should have heard him at Dutfield. Oh, the Freddy Tunbridges. What? Not Aunt Lydia.
What a delightful surprise!
I'm so glad. How do you do, Mrs. Freddy?
My dear Jean, my darling child.
How do you do, Aunt?
You know, I wasn't surprised. I always prophesized.
Shh. Please.
You know, we haven't met since you were in short skirts. Well, I'm Dick Farnborgh.
Oh, I remember.
Not down yet, the elusive one.
Who is the elusive one?
Oh, you know, Lady John's new friend.
Oh, I forgot you hadn't seen Miss Levering. Such a nice creature, don't you think?
Of course I do. You're lucky you get her to come so often. She won't come to other people.
She knows she can rest here.
And what does she do to tire herself?
She's been helping my sister and me with a scheme of ours.
She certainly knows how to inveigle money out of the men.
It would sound less equivocal, Lydia, if you added that the money is to build baths for our shelter for homeless women.
Homeless women?
Yes, in the most insanitary part of Soho.
Oh, really?
Doesn't sound quite Miss Levering's line.
My dear boy, you know as little about what's in a woman's line as most men.
No, I say.
Philanthropy in a woman like Miss Levering is a form of restlessness. But she's a nice creature. All she needs to do is get some nice femme to marry her.
Yes, a woman needs a balanced wheel. Only to keep her from flying back to her hometown on a hot day like today.
Who's proposing anything, so?
The elusive one.
Not Miss.
Oh, yes, before luncheon.
Well, she must be in London by this afternoon, she says. I think I'll just go down and see if she's changed her plans.
I protest. Good Lord, I protest against Miss Levering being carried off to discuss anything so revolting. God bless my soul. What can a woman like you know about it?
Little enough. Good morning.
I should think so indeed.
You aren't serious about going?
We were so happy in that summer house, weren't we?
Well, ideally.
And to be hauled off to talk about public sanitation, forsooth, why, God bless my soul, don't you realize that strains?
I'm dreadfully afraid it is.
And we in the act of discussing Italian literature. Perhaps you'll tell me that isn't a more savory topic for a lady.
Well, for the tramp population, less conducive to savoriness, don't you think, than baths?
No, I can't understand this morbid interest in vagrants. You're much too... Leave it to the others.
What others?
Oh, the sort of woman who smells of India rubber, the typical English spinster. You know it, at least full of her. She never goes anywhere without a mackintosh and collapsible bath rubber. When you look at her, it's borne in upon you that she doesn't only smell of rubber, she's rubber too.
This is my niece, Miss Jean Pickett. Miss Levering?
How do you do?
I'm sure you'd agree with me.
About Miss Levering being too...
For that sort of thing, much too...
What a pity you've exhausted the more eloquent adjectives.
But I haven't.
Well, you can't say to me as you did to Mrs. Freddy, you're too young and too happily married and too
Or what was Mrs. Freddy too happily married and all the rest?
Mr. Greatorex was repudiating the horrid rumor that Mrs. Freddy had been speaking in public about women's trade unions. Wasn't that what you said, Mrs. Heriot?
Yes, if it isn't made up as carefully as your aunt's parties usually are. But here we've got Greatorex, who hates political women, and then we got that inoffensive and mild-looking little lady.
Wait, you don't mean she's really...
Oh, and you've got me.
My dear child, he doesn't hate the charming wives and sweethearts who have to win seats.
Mr. Greatorex objects only to the unsexed creatures who act independently of men.
Yes, I do. Exactly.
It'll
be a long time before we hear anything of that sort.
You mean that rowdy scene in the House of Commons?
Yes, no woman will be able to say suffrage for the next generation, thank heavens.
Oh? I understood that people were more stirred up about it than they'd ever been before.
Not people like you.
How do you know?
God bless my soul.
Saying that only to get a rise out of you.
Ah, yes, your frocks aren't serious enough.
I'm told that it's an exploded notion that the suffrage women are all dowdy and dull.
Don't you believe it?
Well, of course. We know what you've been authority on the subject for, let's see, how many years is it you've kept the house in roars whenever women's rights are mentioned?
Oh, as long as I've known anything about politics, there have been a few discontented old maids and hungry widows.
A few? That's really forbearing of you, Mr. Greatorex. I'm afraid the number of discontented and the hungry was 96,000 among the mill operatives alone. At least the paper said so, didn't they?
Oh, don't ask me. That kind of woman doesn't interest me, I'm afraid. Only I am able to point out to the people who lose their heads and seem inclined to treat the phenomenon seriously that there's absolutely nothing new in it. There have been women for the past 40 years who haven't anything more pressing to do than petition Parliament.
And that's as far as they've got.
That's as far as they'll ever get.
Let me see, wasn't a deputation sent to you not long ago?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes, I remember. I thought at the time, in my modest way, it was nothing short of heroic of them to go asking audience of their arch opponent.
It didn't come off.
Oh, I thought they insisted on bearding the lion in his den.
Of course I wasn't going to be bothered with a lot of...
You don't mean you refused to go out and face them?
I wouldn't have done it for worlds, but a friend of mine went and had a look at him.
Well, did he get back alive?
Yes, but he told me not to bother.
Why not?
It wasn't going to go anywhere. They were all weak and it was pointless.
You
Clearly
remember
nothing
Mrs. Freddy's friend? You remember Mrs. Freddy's friend who came to tea in the winter? He was a member of Parliament too, quite a little young one. He said that women would never be respected till they had the vote.
I remember telling him he was too young to know what he was talking about.
Yes, I'm afraid you all sat on the poor gentleman.
It was such fun. He was as flat as a pancake when we done with him. Aunt Susan told him in her most distinguished air that she didn't want to be respected.
My dear Lady Joan.
Quite right. Awful idea to think you're respected.
Simply revolting.
Now, you frivolous people, go away. We've only got a few minutes to talk over the terms of the late Mr. Sober's munificence before the carriage comes from Miss Levering.
Did you know they got $8,000 out of Sober before he died? Whoever got him to do so.
Well, Miss Levering, he wouldn't do it for me, but she got him around.
Yes, by Jove, I do believe so. Well, isn't she wonderful?
Oh, nice creature. All she needs is to...
Too wonderful to waste her time on the wrong people.
I shall waste less of my time after this.
I'm relieved to hear it. I can't see you wheedling money of shelters and rot of that sort of retired grocers.
You see, you call it rot. We couldn't have got $8,000 out of you.
I'm not so sure. If I gave you that much for your little projects, what would you give me?
Well, Soper didn't ask that.
Soper, I should think not.
Did you hear what Miss Heriot said about him? So kind, so magnificent, so vulgar, poor soul. We couldn't know him in London, but we shall meet him in heaven. Sit over there, my dear. You needn't stay, Jean. This won't interest you.
It's only an effort to meet the greatest evil in the world.
What do you call the greatest evil in the world?
The helplessness of women.
Jean, darling, I know you can think of nothing but him, so just go and...
Indeed. Indeed, I can think of everything better because of him. He's lit up everything for me. He's made things more vivider, more significant.
Who has?
Yes, I don't care about things less, but 1,000 times more.
You are in love.
Oh, I congratulate you.
Well, this, you see, maybe it's a difficulty you raise.
Yes, quite.
But it's going to cost a great deal more.
It's worth it.
We'll have nothing left for the organ at St. Pilgrim's.
My dear Lydia, we're putting the organ aside.
We can't afford to put aside the elevating effect of music.
What we must make for first is the cheap and humanely conducted lodging house.
There are already several of those, but poor St. Pilgrim's.
None for the poorest of women.
No, not even the excellent Soper was for multiplying rotten houses. You can never get men to realize. You can never always get women to...
It's the work least able to wait.
I don't agree with you, and I happen to have spent a great deal of my life in works of charity.
Ah, then you'll be interested in the girl I saw dying in the Trent ward a little while ago. Glad her cough was worse. Only she mustn't die before her father. 2 reasons. Nobody but her to keep the old man out of the workhouse, and father is so proud. If she died first, he would starve. Worst of all, he might know what happened to his little girl in New York City.
She didn't say, I suppose, how she happened to fall so low.
Yes. She had been in service. She lost the train back one Sunday night and was too terrified of her employer to dare ring him up after hours. The wrong person found her crying on the platform.
She should have gone to one of those friendly societies.
At 11 at night?
And there are the rescue leagues. I myself have been associated one for over 20 years.
20 years, always arriving after the train's gone. After the girl and the wrong person have gone to the journey's end.
Where is she now?
Never mind.
2 nights ago, she was waiting at a street corner in the rain.
Near a public house, I suppose.
Yes, a sort of public house. She was plainly dying. She was told she shouldn't be out in the rain. I mustn't go in yet, she said. This is what he has given me, and she began to cry. In her hand, she held 2 pennies silvered over to look like half-crowns.
I don't believe that story. That's just the sort of thing some sensation monger trumps up. Now, who tells such...
Several credible people. I didn't believe them until...
Till
last week I saw for myself.
Saw where?
In a low lodging house, not 100 yards from the church you want a new organ for.
And how did you happen to be there?
I was on a pilgrimage.
Pilgrimage?
Into the underworld.
You went?
How could you?
Put on an old gown and a tawdry hat. You'll never know how many things are hidden from a woman in good clothes. The bold, free look of a man on a woman he believes to be destitute. You must feel that look on you before you can understand a good half of history.
Jean.
Where did you go? Just like that?
Down among the homeless women on a wet night looking for shelter.
No wonder you've been ill.
And it's like that?
No,
No.
it's so much worse. I dare not tell about it. Even if you weren't here, I couldn't.
You needn't suppose, darling, that those wretched creatures feel as we would.
The girls who need shelter and work aren't all serving maids.
We know that all women who make mistakes aren't.
That is why every woman ought to take an interest in this. Every girl, too.
Yes.
No,
Oh, yes.
it's a matter for us older.
Or for a person who has some special knowledge. We can't pretend to have access to such sources of information, Miss Levering.
Yes, for I can give you access. As you seem to think, I have some first-hand knowledge about homeless girls.
Well, my dear, it will all come inconvenient.
It once happened to me to take offense at an ugly thing that was going on under my father's roof. Years ago, I was an impulsive girl. I turned my back on my father's house.
That was ill-advised.
Well, if a girl does that...
That was what all my relations said. And I couldn't explain.
Not to your mother?
She was dead. I went to London to a small hotel and tried to find employment. I wandered about all day and every day from agency to agency. I was supposed to be educated. I'd been brought up partly in Philadelphia. I could play several instruments and sing little songs in 4 different tongues.
Did no one want you to teach French or sing those little songs?
Heads of schools thought me too young. There were people ready to listen to my singing, but the terms, they were too hard. Soon my money was gone. I began to pawn my trinkets. They went.
And still no work.
No. But by that time, I had some real education. An unpaid hotel bill and not a shilling in the world. Some girls think it hardship to have to earn their living. The horror is not to be allowed to.
What happened?
My dear, have your things been sent down? Are you quite ready?
Yes, all but my scarf.
Well,
Well, by chance, I met a friend of my family.
that was lucky.
I thought so. He was nearly 10 years older than I. He said he wanted to help me.
And didn't he?
Perhaps, after all, he did. Why do I waste my time over myself? I belonged to the little class of armed women. My body wasn't born weak, and my spirit wasn't broken by the habit of slavery, but as Mrs. Heriot was kind enough to hint, I do know something about the possible fate of homeless girls. I found there were pleasant parks, museums, free libraries in our great rich New York, and not one single place where destitute women can be sure of work that isn't killing, or food that isn't worse than prison fare. That's why women ought not to sleep o' nights till the shelter stands spreading out wide arms.
No. No.
Even when it's built, you'll see, many of those creatures will prefer the life they lead. They like it.
The woman told me, one of the sort that knows, told me many of them like it so much that they are indifferent to the risk of being sent to prison. It gives them a rest, she told me.
Rest?
I want to begin to understand something of... I'm horribly ignorant.
I'm a rather busy person.
I have quite a special reason for wanting not to be ignorant. I could come to town tomorrow if you'll meet me for lunch.
Thank you. I must go grab my scarf.